The Chargers plot to contain the NFL's toughest running back. The Rams face an all-too-familiar nemesis, and UCLA might make a quarterback decision at the end of this weekend. Might. Maybe. Who knows? Hi, I'm James of Faithful Angelino Sports with the September 15th edition of Friday Night Chalk Talk, where we break down the keys and goals for each of LA's football teams during the regular season and the playoffs. We'll talk about both NFL teams and UCLA tonight because USC has the week off. If you like talking about USC, UCLA, the Rams and Chargers, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're talking about them almost every day anyway. We are going to change the pace. Last week we were talking pretty much exclusively about the Rams offense. Today, both for the Chargers and the Rams, we are going to talk defense. This is on purpose because to me, those are the keys, the Rams defense and the Chargers defense, in order to get a victory. The Chargers, they took it on the chin last week with Miami's blazing speed. Now they're in Tennessee. And in a sense, they get kind of a break in one sense, because you're not talking about a lot of speed, but holy crap, you are getting a lot of power. You are going to get a fist in the mouth, and you need to know how to bounce off that. Stopping Derrick Henry is the key, and we're going to break down what the Chargers defense has to do in order to give themselves that chance. Fans have been begging their teams to stop Derrick Henry for years, because stop Derrick Henry is what is going to keep the Bolts from falling to 0-2 and stop the mob from demanding Brandon Staley's head on a pike. It's just that simple. Because Henry piles up yards. He's rushed for more than 1,000 in 4 of the last 5 seasons. He passed 2,000 yards back in 2020. But it's not just the numbers. He is one of the NFL's apex predators. His stiff arms are the stuff of YouTube legend. Now, the Titans, they pioneered intelligent smash mouth football with him. So again, he is the key. It's not the pass, unlike Miami. Tennessee can't pass. There is a strong belief in the NFL that Ryan Tannehill has lost arm strength, and by the way, that the Titans have the worst receiving core in the NFL. I mean, last week, Tannehill didn't even throw a touchdown. He threw 3 picks, but no TDs. The Titans have so little faith in Tannehill that they have spent relatively high draft picks in each of the last 2 drafts to find his replacement, including a second rounder in this last draft where they took Will Levis of Kentucky. Keep that in mind if the Chargers break out to a huge lead. Levis might make his NFL debut. Matter of fact, Tennessee's impatient. Had they bothered to address other needs on their team, they could have waited for 2024 when there's an elite class of quarterbacks coming out. But we're going to get to the here and now. The Titans offense likes to zone block up front. That concept basically is taking all 5 offensive linemen and instead of just pushing straight up, power blocking, instead of pulling guards and tackles from one side of the line of scrimmage to the other, which is something that USC does, and the Steelers did back in decades of yore. What zone blocking is all 5 offensive linemen are going to push in one direction, left or right. And what the running back, in this case Henry, is going to do is he is going to look for a hole of his choosing and blast through it. Now, why does that matter? It matters in a number of reasons for the Chargers because the Chargers signed linebackers who were supposed to be able to run from end to end. In other words, the Chargers linebackers were specifically designed to help contain zone blocking run offenses. We'll get to that in a second. The problem the Chargers face, however, is going to be health with those linebackers. One of them, for example, Eric Kendricks, who was signed from Minnesota specifically for his ability to go from one side of the field to the other, hasn't been practicing this week. Therefore, the players that the Chargers will really have to rely on is Daiyan Henley, who is questionable to play last time I checked, Kenneth Murray Jr., and possibly outside linebacker Chris Rumpf. If the Chargers, then these linebackers have to stay patient. In other words, they have to resist the urge to overplay one way or another. They have to kind of follow their defensive line. Because if they get too aggressive and they go too far to one side, guess what happens? That opens up a hole for Henry to just blast right through. In other words, you're literally asking the linebackers and your defensive line to move in concert from one side of the field to the other. If the Chargers linebackers do not stay patient, a hole could open up in either the A gap or the B gap. Now, you may have heard of the A and B gaps before. The A gap is located between the center and the guard, where the B gap is located between the guards and the tackles. Observe how I've drawn the Chargers defensive line in this scenario. You have the nose tackle not lining up opposite the center. You have him lining up specifically to close off one of the two A gaps. In addition to that, you have an end blocking off a B gap. Possibly this defensive end will block off the other. And so the linebackers are just going to be following along, making sure this A gap does not turn into a hole for Henry to slice through. That's one method to do it. Slants also help. What is a slant? Slanting is when you ask your defensive line, if we're talking about the offensive line going from end to end as one unit would in zone blocking, you're asking your defensive line to slant, literally like a dance, going from one side to the other. Basically, what the Chargers are going to try to accomplish is to create a powder blue and white wall. Because if Henry cannot find a hole, he has to slow down and wait for one to develop. If he slows down and waits for one to develop, the Chargers can get him in the backfield. So the point being is that with Derrick Henry, you're not looking for the big knockout blow. You're trying to get him to slow down behind the line of scrimmage. Now, it also, by the way, might be easier for the Chargers this time around. The Tennessee Titans had to replace 3 offensive linemen since the end of last year. Now, what happens if you wind up getting up to Derrick Henry one-on-one? You damn sure better tackle low. Don't try to tackle him high. I mentioned earlier that his stiff arms are the stuff of legend. Derrick Henry doesn't make you look stupid because he has agility like Barry Sanders. Derrick Henry makes you look like a crime victim on national TV because he literally just beat the hell out of you in front of everybody. You will not make the knockout blow on Derrick Henry. He knocks you out. Tackle low. Now, despite losing last week, the Chargers defense actually gives fans hope for this one. The Bolts were terrible against the run for the last 2 years, but they held Miami last week in the loss to just 70 yards. 70. That is giving you hope that maybe, just maybe, the Chargers should win this game. Tennessee hasn't won since November of last year. It is an 8-game losing streak. I look at them, and then I look at a relatively weak AFC South, and I think they're trying to avoid a complete rebuild, and I think they're kind of half-assing it, and I think if the Chargers stay disciplined on defense, and we know the Chargers can put up points on offense, I don't think Tennessee can hold up. I don't. If the Chargers run for anything like they did last week, they win. That's as simple as that, even though Austin Eckler hasn't practiced either. For the Titans to win, the Chargers have to play into their hands. The Bolts are flying to the East time zone, and West Coast teams sometimes have to wake up. That's what makes stopping Henry so important. If Tennessee gets a lead in the first half, particularly one of more than a touchdown, then they're just going to keep giving Henry the rock and let the clock just tick, tick, tick away. But having said that, if the Chargers stay disciplined, they could win relatively easily. Rooting for injuries makes you a grotesque person. It just does. But the one thing I believe that will stop the 49ers, the San Francisco 49ers, more than anything else from a Super Bowl run is an injury to quarterback Brock Purdy. Not trying to be funny, not trying to be cruel, damn sure not trying to put a bounty on somebody's head, but it could happen at any moment in Purdy's case. Purdy got the Niners to 8 wins last year as a rookie, who was the very last pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Purdy replaced Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo then got injured and left for Vegas. Garoppolo, by the way, also replaced Trey Lance, who was injured, and he was also traded to Dallas a few weeks ago. What I'm basically getting at is this. The 49ers cycled through 3 starting quarterbacks, still made it to the NFC Championship game. It's a strong, resilient football team. San Francisco in the last 4 years has reached the Super Bowl and a couple of more conference title games. Only 3 teams have done that since 1970. They are a loaded team on defense. They have all pros on the defensive line, linebackers, and defensive backfield. They have the defensive player of the year in Nick Bosa. They led the league in picks last year. So we know their defense is pretty damn strong, which means the Rams aren't going to score as often as they did against Seattle. So that means, like I said, we're talking about defense. Defense versus the Niners offense. You could either stop Christian McCaffrey, which leads to bigger problems than trying to stop Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey is a defense magnet. What I mean by that, everybody keys on him. And all of a sudden, the wide receivers for the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, get wide open. In other words, they have so much going for them on defense and on offense. The weak link in that team is quarterback Brock Purdy, who still hasn't played 10 NFL games. Purdy tore his ulnar collateral ligament when he got blasted by the Eagles in the NFC title game last year. If you watch Dodgers baseball as much as I do, you know what trouble the ulnar ligament is. You know that means Tommy John surgery. He decided not to have it. Instead, he opted for an internal brace. All of that means is Brock Purdy could literally be just one hit from going to the sideline. Not a cheap shot, just a regular hit can keep him on the sideline. And by the way, the Niners do not have Garoppolo to fall back on. It's Sam Darnold. So what should the Rams do to get to Brock Purdy? Well, because against Seattle last week, Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris seemed to use a lot of the 3-3-5 defensive alignment, sometimes a 5-2-4. But even in the 5-2-4, if you had these two people lining up on the defensive line up here, those linebackers would still drop back to this position anyway. So it was often still like a 3-3-5. And then they started mixing things up. I saw safety Quentin Lake line up alongside Ernest Jones as the linebacker. Now, it's a funky defensive alignment, but there's a reason the Rams use the funky defensive alignments like a 5-2-4 or a 3-3-5. It's because the Rams are extremely athletic. They're young. These are versatile defenses that require you to be athletic because you're going to be all over the map. The thing with the 3-3-5, offensive coordinators have told me that it's a bitch to plot against the 3-3-5 because you know the blitz is coming, but you have no idea where it's coming from. You can't predict it. Also, with 5 defensive backs, the corners and these 3 safeties, you can literally play both corners up to either chuck the wide receivers at the line of scrimmage, support the run. And then you have the rest in a cover 3 to keep Ayuk or Samuel from making big plays. Now, it's not a perfect defense, I will grant you that. I wouldn't use the 3-3-5 all game long because it is risk-reward. Again, you only have 3 linemen, you only have 3 linebackers. You're not lining up man-to-man up against, you're not putting enough people in the box to play against your opposing offense. I mean, if you think about it, you watch USC football. You notice how USC gives up all those big-ass plays? It's because defensive coordinator Alex Grinch also likes to use a 3-3-5. He's a gambling defensive coordinator. For the Rams to win, Raheem Morris has to make those gambles. Also, there's another hole with the 3-3-5. If you remember back the last year, the year before, the 49ers would run jet sweeps. Well, if these linebackers are back here instead of playing up in the line, you don't have anybody on the ends, except for the corners. You can run jet sweeps on the 3-3-5. So, For the Rams, Michael Hoyt, a defensive lineman who now plays the edge, rookie Byron Young. These are your games to shine, guys. I think the Rams have an advantage in that San Francisco is also playing back-to-back road games. It's extremely tough for a team to take that second game away from home, so it's a possibility the Niners might get tired. I do believe the 49ers should be favorites, but if you're trying to limit that offense, if you're trying to basically make a statement by putting the fear of God into Brock Purdy, and the Rams are also already running a version of the 3-3-5, I think that's how you do it. For UCLA, I spent a few hours trying to learn whatever I could about North Carolina Central. They're all silly, shallow things that I learned. For example, did you know their nickname was the Eagles? Have you ever heard of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference? Let alone could I give you a cogent argument as to how a Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference team can fly across the country and defeat a top 25 football team? Guess what? I can't. For that matter, here's a question. Is anybody going to watch it? It's on the Pac-12 network. Look, I can tell you very little about these guys. They're actually well coached. They went 10-2 last year. They defeated Jackson State. That was the school that Deion Sanders used as a springboard to get the Colorado gig. The Eagles have a running quarterback named Davius Richard. He and running back Latrell Collier have each rushed for 3 touchdowns, and they have combined for more than 300 rushing yards. Look, the Bruins are going to kick their asses. Straight and simple. But it would be nice to see if UCLA's front can defend the run. That is going to matter against Utah. That is going to matter against USC. So it's not a key to victory as much as it is a key to see how the Bruins are going to perform for the rest of the year. I mentioned the UCLA quarterback situation earlier. I can only give you a guess. I think it's messed up that Chip Kelly hasn't made a decision as to which quarterback is the guy, but I do believe a decision is going to be made just before conference play. It would not surprise me if the dude swapped quarterbacks every single series on Saturday. It really wouldn't. But I will tell you this. If the starter plays 2 or 3 series, gets a couple of scores, and then immediately gets pulled, and then all of a sudden the other 2 quarterbacks play the entire rest of the game, that first quarterback won the quarterback competition. That would be my guess. Because Kelly probably pulled that particular starter because he doesn't want the guy to get hurt. But I've been wrong before. So to recap, of the 3 games, UCLA is the only sure winner. The Chargers, provided that their linebackers stay disciplined and provided Eric Kendricks gets his health back in time, they have a really good shot at defeating Tennessee. And I think the Rams have a chance, albeit not a great one. They have to take out Brock Purdy this Sunday. Those are my ideas about the weekend's football games. So if you enjoyed talking LA football with me, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelinos. We talk about Rams, the Chargers, USC, and UCLA every single day here. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelinos is a Kian Corte El Queso production. Take care.